Hello, welcome to The Plain Truth. I'm your host, Plain, and each week we like to get into a mystery, anomaly, or a bit of the dirty underbelly of the world around us. Joining us this week, we have Servando Gonzales, who is originally from Cuba and has looked into the situation behind what has gone down there in the last 50 years. Servando, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Well, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. And joining us today is my friend Jerry. Jerry, are you there?
I'm ready.
Okay, well, let's get to the heart of the matter. Servando, you've written some interesting books. I remember Psychological Warfare and the New World Order was one of them. But why don't we start with the general background? How did you get interested in this research?
Yeah, that's what I have in mind. Well, as you mentioned, I'm Cuban. I was born in Cuba, and then even I was an officer in the Cuban Army during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I was an early supporter of Castro. Not really of Castro, to the people who overthrew the government of President Batista. Batista became a dictator, and what people was a rebellion to get this corrupt politician and put in power another politician, probably as corrupt but not as bad as him. But after 50 years, I have realized that Batista was just a sort of Nixon on steroid. He was not that bad compared with Castro. Now, Castro changed things and changed this rebellion into a revolution, but we learned that later. At the beginning, I was a supporter, and I worked in Cuba many times. But then in 1980 came the Mariel Leaf, during which more than 130 or 50,000 Cubans left the island in a few weeks. And what I saw those days was like a reenactment of the early persecution of the Jews in Nazi Germany. That I remember. My son was just 4 years old, and my wife and I would say, well, we both work for the government, of course, the only employer in Cuba. And then I said, no, we prefer to die trying to leave this country, but we are not going to stay. This is too much. First time in my life that I was ashamed of being a Cuban, what I saw. And that was time. Now, it's a long story. Finally, we managed, after the Mariel Boat Leaf ended, I developed a crazy plan that finally worked. And then we ended up in Switzerland. We lived for close to a year in Zurich, and then came to the United States. My father was living here, and I have a lot of friends that told me to come to the United States, and then to Miami, of course. And then I say that we are the only Cubans who have escaped twice from Cuba. First time from Havana, and second from Miami. We moved to New York, and we have been all around. Now, I'm my academic formation. I'm a historian. I have degrees in history. I was trained as a historian at the University of Havana. Then once in the United States, I have published in Cuba, but seems about technology, science and technology. And then when I moved to New York, I had a 3 times a week column of political satire in Spanish in the largest Spanish circulation newspaper at the time. And then I moved with my family to San Francisco, and then began writing political satire that I love in Spanish. Then some years later, I decided to write a book, a sort of biography of Castro. But then there is an early article that I wrote many years ago that I titled Fidel Castro Supermole. that is 1995. Was I think it was the very first article I published in the internet, Fidel Castro Supermall. Still, if you search, you're going to find it. And the theory was that was in English, and was tongue-in-cheek, a theory that I say, wait, the same way that James Jesus Angleton, the chief of the CIA's chief of counterintelligence, had the theory that a KGB mole had infiltrated the CIA using what is called the mirror image theory. There should be a chief of counterintelligence in the KGB that had the theory that the CIA had infiltrated a mole into the Soviet system. And I made a name for this theoretical guy. I call him Angletonovich. Okay, Angletonovich. And then, of course, Angletonovich had the theory that the mole was Fidel Castro. Because reading about Castro, I discovered that at the very beginning, the Soviets have strong suspicions that Fidel Castro was an agent of the American intelligence infiltrated that was trying to get into their camp. Many years later, I discovered that I was not totally wrong. I was close to the reality, the truth, because the son of Nikita Khrushchev was the Soviet Prime Minister, Premier of the Soviet Union. His son, Sergei Khrushchev, he had lived for many years in the United States. He's an American citizen and a college professor. And he told in a speech he gave, in a lecture he gave at the university, that when he was a teenager, one day he was in the Kremlin. That was probably 1960. And he was at the Kremlin, and he overheard his father, Nikita, talking to other senior members of the Soviet Politburo, that they had suspicion that Fidel Castro was working for the Americans. Okay? Then I began seeing more and more clues, and then I wrote this article, Fidel Castro Supermall. Then when I began working for my book on Fidel Castro, that eventually was published in 2001 under the title The Secret Fidel Castro, Deconstructing the Symbol, I have, in my research and my writing, I reached the conclusion that modern historical events, where there is a high content of intelligence and espionage, to study these events, the tools of the historian do not work. And then I began teaching myself intelligence and espionage, and it's not easy if you have been a part of one of these agencies. I began learning and reading, and then I created something, a theory or a methodology that I call historical tradecraft. Tradecraft is what is called the modus operandi of the intelligence agencies, and that the historical tradecraft is the application of the methodology of research and analysis of the intelligence analysts to historical events. And the result is this book, The Secret Fidel Castro. Now, The Secret Fidel Castro, Deconstructing the Symbol, is not a biography of Fidel Castro. It's not a history of the Cuban Revolution. It's what is called a CPP, Comprehensive Personality Profile, like the ones that all intelligence agencies around the world keep on foreign leaders, and important personalities. I'm sure that the Mossad now has a big file on the new Pope, a file on Putin, a file on Castro, and the same, the British intelligence, the MI6, they have files on the Israeli leaders, on Obama. They have, but these are made not with the technology, with the technological approach, with the methodology of a historian, but of the intelligence analyst that is quite different. Now, I use in my book, The Secret of Fidel Castro, I follow the model of CPP, Comprehensive Personality Profile, made during the war by William Langer about Adolf Hitler. William Langer was a member of the OSS, Office of Special Services. He was also a scholar, a university professor, and he made a secret study about Adolf Hitler, what he was, how he would react, what he was going to do. And this analysis was published many, many years later under the name The Mind of Adolf Hitler. And this was what I use as a model to follow in this book, The Secret Fidel Castro. And the book is available, it's in Amazon, and I suggest that you read it because it's a totally different book from what you can find. It's not anti-Castro, it's pro-Castro. It's just an intelligence analysis of the person. Among my amazing discoveries is, for example, one that Castro is not a communist. He has never been, and he will never be. And that, of course, I gained the displeasure of the anti-Castro Cubans in Miami because they are convinced that Castro is a communist. And
one of the things you mentioned in your in the book on the psychological operation, Servando, is that communism and fascism, most people believe that they're sort of diametrically opposed from one another. But as you pointed out, that's not really the case in reality. They pretty much overlap in the middle, right?
Yeah. And actually, both in my psychological warfare, I show how both communism and fascism were born in the United States. But keeping with Castro, well, you are correct. This is and for the confusion comes because they are very similar. But there are strong differences. Well, in the first place, Cuba had a very strong, powerful communist party before Castro took power in 1959. They had a daily national newspaper. They have a radio station. They had a member of the Communist Party have been senators, representatives. Mayor of Santiago de Cuba was for some time a member of the Communist Party. But Castro was never a member of the Communist Party. Moreover, when Castro, in 1953, Castro and a group of his followers attacked a military garrison in the eastern part of Cuba, in Santiago, Cuba, the Moncada barracks. And then he was detained, and then Batista, that was the dictator, the president who turned into a dictator, immediately that he heard about the attack, he blamed the communists. Oh, the communists did this. And how the communists say no? They say, no. Well, we didn't. It was this crazy guy. And he said putschist. Well, putschism is it was the communist lingo of the times of the post-war for fascism. They call it. And actually what Castro did was a push very similar to Hitler's push of 1934, and this was Castro's push in 1953. Now, listen to this, that is very important. When after Castro was captured, most of the people were killed, but he escaped, he was captured, and then in his trial, he assumed his own defense, and he gave an impassioned speech, and he ended his speech with the phrase, condemn me, never mind, history will absolve me. And that became very famous. Even his speech was published in book form under the title "History Will Absolve Me." This is something of iconic of his career. Well, when Hitler gave the push, tried to give the push in 1934, he was captured. He was sent to jail, and then during his trial, he assumed his own defense, and he ended his defense with the phrase, never mind, condemn me. The goddess of history will absolve me. Amazing. Both Castro and Hitler, the same phrase. Well, it's not surprising because Castro was the son of a rich landlord on the eastern part of Cuba. He sent his son, Castro, as a teenager, to study at the Belén High School in Havana. The Belén was a school controlled by the Jesuits, and then there's some Jesuits priests that were pro-Franco-fascists. They called Falangists. Castro loved them, and he fell under their influence. And it is known that Castro was an avid reader of Hitler, Mussolini, and Spanish fascist Primo de Rivera. So Castro has never been a communist. He has more of the fascists than of the communists. Also, if you read Castro's speeches, the Marxist terminology is totally absent. He doesn't know anything about Marxism. One day he confessed that he began reading Das Kapital, Marx Das Kapital, and then he just after page 30 or 35 he stopped because he didn't like it. So he's a total ignoramus in Marxist theory. And then also Castro has always been a charismatic leader. Well, charisma is totally out of the communist idea. You found charismatic leaders in Italy, Mussolini, in Germany, Hitler in Spain, Franco, but never, nobody mentioned that Stalin was charismatic, Mao Zedong was charismatic. There is no charismatic leaders in the communist field. On the other hand, as you well say, there are many similarities because both fascism and communism were creations or are creations of the most reactionary international bankers to fool the masses and exploit them even more. So my book, then that's about the book, The Secret Fidel Castro, published in 2001. Then in 2002, I published another big book, The Nuclear Deception, Nikita Khrushchev and the Cuban Missile Crisis. As I told you, I was an officer in the Cuban Army during the missile crisis. And then, I knew about the missile crisis, what everybody knew. I have read the books by historians, by Kennedy, all of the things. But then I began reading and really said, well, there is something weird here. I'm going to tell you, and this is you can verify that. According to most books about the Cuban Missile Crisis, on October, well, there were rumors that the Soviets were placing nuclear missiles in Cuba, but but none of them confirmed. But then, on October 16, 1962, the CIA, one of the CIA analysts, had a meeting with President Kennedy, and he was shown what they call the irrefutable proof that the Soviets have installed strategic nuclear missiles in Cuba. And that proof were the U-2 photographs. The U-2 photographs, and then Kennedy, well, decided to the blockade and all that. But
Servando, do you think that the I mean, more or less the official story is that the U.S. put nukes in Turkey, right, and the Soviets retaliated, and then we have the story. You know, this is Servando. I'm originally from D.C., and I'm just saying, like, it's like the word on the street in D.C. kind of thing. And then
yeah. Well, that.
Now that's going to be totally different from the news media. That's designed to deceive everyone.
Let me give you my version. Okay, so these photographs were the proof. Oh, this is the U-2 photographs. Not only the U-2 photos, but the low flying Voodoo planes. The photographs are now in high resolution in the internet, very high resolution. Well, try to find a nuclear missile in the photos. There are no such things in the photographs, not at all. Well, there are some long boxes covered with tarpaulins that the CIA said that inside there were missiles. There were some small concrete buildings, concept type, that the CIA say that inside were the nuclear warheads. And then you saw when finally Nikita Khrushchev decided to bring back the missiles to the Soviet Union, you see the boxes on top, on the cover of the ships, and then you don't see the missiles. And it's interesting because I have always asked myself, and why Kennedy didn't order the Navy to board the ships and physically inspect the missiles. Not at all. Not at all.
I think you mentioned in your book too that they didn't detect any nuclear signatures from the.
Well, that's the most important thing. I think that probably the only book that mentions that is my book. That that nowhere in the literature, and there have been more than 50, 60 books and hundreds of articles, it is mentioned the signature. And the thing is that nuclear warheads emit radiation. There's nothing about that. No.
Well, Servando, I a couple of things here, though. I mean, first of all, a lot of us have heard over the years. I mean, I heard from a retired intelligence guy quite a while ago. Actually, I've heard from several sources that the Soviets didn't put nukes in Cuba. So I don't have a problem with that because I think they didn't trust Castro, and he was wild, and, you know, unless they totally had control of it, which they couldn't guarantee in a faraway country, you know, they wouldn't want to take the chance. So I understand that, but I mean, I guess we need to set what I'm saying is the background to it is, do you think the U.S. actually put nukes in Turkey? In other words, who's setting up whom is what I'm trying to say. In other words, at the low level, you got Castro, but then you got the thing that the U.S. military was trying to set a trap for Kennedy too, right? So we have different levels of traps going on here.
Well, but you know, we can explain the war program.
Yes, that's true.
Because it's fascinating. But actually, I think that the trap was Nikita Khrushchev's. Okay, because let me tell you, this is something that is only you can find in my book. In my book, have you heard the name Sergei Kudryavtsev? Of course not.
Don't
I've,
think so.
I've never heard it.
Never heard about that. Well, any book about the missile crisis, I go to the index names, and then if the name Kudryavtsev is not there, I know that the book is a pile of trash. Because, let me tell you why. Sergei Kudryavtsev was the Soviet ambassador in Cuba in 1962. Now, in his memoirs, Nikita Khrushchev, he mentioned how in April 1962, he was in this, what is the Olympic in Sochi? I believe he was there. And then he saw across the sea, say, oh, look at that in Turkey. The Americans, they have nuclear missiles pointing to the Soviet Union. I'm going to give them a try of their own medicine. I'm going to give nuclear missiles to Castro and then see what they do. Well, but the problem is that either Nikita Khrushchev, he was crazy or he was a masochist because in early April, Castro had expelled, and this is a unique case in the relation between two communist countries, Castro had expelled the Soviet ambassador, Sergei Kudryavtsev, from Cuba. Actually, he was detained and put in a plane even without allowing him to get a fresh underwear. Okay? And he was flown to Moscow. A few days before, Castro had recalled the Cuban ambassador, Faure Chomon, from Moscow. So when two countries recall their ambassadors, and in this case it's worse because one of them was not recalled, was expelled. How do we call that in diplomatic language? We say that the relations are in a very low point. And how come I'm going to believe that that was the moment that Nikita Khrushchev found right to give nuclear missiles to Castro? He was crazy. Well, in my, you mentioned that there's a theory that there was a trap that the military put on Kennedy. My theory is that actually was a trap that Nikita Khrushchev put on Kennedy. He wanted the Americans to invade Cuba and get rid of Castro. And then after that, he would have gone to the United Nations and criticized American imperialism, and actually the Americans would have done the dirty job for him. By the way, Castro discovered the plot. The ambassador was hatching a plot to overthrow Castro. The ambassador, Sergei Kudryavtsev, was an old KGB hand. He, in his book, KGB Baron called him master spy. He was not a fool. And he had been expelled from Canada before being sent to Cuba. Now, after Castro expelled him, just a few months later, he was sent by the Soviet Union. He was sent as a chief of the Soviet mission in the UNESCO. So that means that he was not acting by his own, that he was trying to overthrow Castro, following Nikita Khrushchev orders. So everything you read about the Cuban Missile Crisis, you have to take with a grain of salt. Okay?
Oh, for sure. There's no question about that. I mean, the question is, you know, there are levels and levels here, and then traps within traps, right? And so Khrushchev was trying to get rid of a problem. And, you know, for the listeners, it might be good to kind of return to this and step back a bit and say, okay, you know, the evidence is actually overwhelming that Castro was an American agent. And Khrushchev did not trust them. The whole Soviet Politburo did not trust Castro at all. And so, in other words, when you say that Khrushchev wanted to set a trap to get rid of him, you got to realize he viewed Castro as a problem. And we kind of need to set that in people's minds that the Soviet Union was actually a defensive kind of empire. They had a lot of problems, just like actually Russia has a lot of problems today, right? And messing around in Central America was far, far away from where they wanted to be.
Well, let me explain you. Actually, the problem with the Nikita Khrushchev, after Stalin, there came some brief leaders, and then came Nikita Khrushchev. And then Nikita Khrushchev, suddenly, he had an idea. He said in a speech, I think it was in the speech where he criticized Stalin, or in a close to that, and he said, well, we cannot keep going into this Cold War, because Cold War will lead to a nuclear war, and then nobody's going to win. Then he launched his new theory of peaceful coexistence, which means that, well, the Soviet, the communists will keep fighting capitalism and the United States, but not in the military field. Well, in the business, industrial, cultural areas, but not in the military. Of course, that speech terrorized the members of the military-industrial complex in the United States and the bankers, okay? Because the Soviet Union is an artificial creation of the CFR bankers, conspirators. They created that enemy. And then they need the enemy. And then they call good Castro to the rescue. Now, as I told you at the beginning, the Soviet, they had suspicions. Castro tried to get into them, but they didn't buy. And then came the Bay of Pigs. And then the Bay of Pigs was not a failure. The Bay of Pigs was designed to fail, and it failed, so it was a total success. Then that convinced the Soviets of Castro's bona fides. They say, well, the guy is real. He defeated the Americans. And then that was the beginning of accepting Castro in the communist camp. Now, what was the first thing that Castro began doing as soon as he get into the communist camp? He began fighting Nikita Khrushchev's theory of peaceful coexistence. And he began creating guerrillas in Central America, in South America, terrorism all around the world. Castro gave help to most of the terrorist groups at the time.
And Servando,
yeah.
Just on that point, that was one of the questions I had when reading your book was, why would Castro, if he was a CFR or U.S. agent, why would he attack some of the pro-U.S. fascist dictators in Latin America? That I sort of didn't really understand how that worked.
Well, is the United States now attacking the fascist dictator in Syria? Is attacking it? Well, it never fails. They overthrew Trujillo, overthrew Somoza. Yeah. So.
But they only do that when they refuse to play ball with the United States, right? Syria has always been a thorn in their side.
Yeah, they use the CIA to overthrow Mossadegh in Iran. The CIA to overthrow Jacob Arbenz in Guatemala in 1954. So they play those games.
I guess maybe as soon as the dictators kind of go against what they want, then I suppose they destabilize them.
Well, now you see something that it's not me the only one that is seeing. It seems that now they are trying to throw Japan under the bus, but not only Japan, probably even Israel. Okay, they don't need Israel anymore. We don't know their game. They don't have true friends. They use people, they use countries, and then decide at some time to create. Now, keep in mind that Castro. Let's go to the early links between Castro and the CIA. Actually, the CIA recruited Castro in early 1948. Castro was 21 years old. He was a student at a law school at the University of Havana. He was a gangster, and at the time he already had killed at least another student. And then they recruited him, and they sent him to Bogota, Colombia, as an agent provocateur to participate in the assassination of Colombian leader Gaitan, and to incite the riots called El Bogotazo, the Bogotazo riots. Okay, it is known that he was there and he participated in the riot. What is not well known as is that he was there as a CIA agent provocateur. Now, and after that, they called him, and then they allow him to get power in Cuba. It is known that the CIA, but the CIA is a tool of the international and American bankers, the Wall Street bankers, and they use the CIA to help Castro get in power in Cuba, and immediately he began trying to infiltrate into the Soviet camp. Why? Because the Cold War, the only justification of the Cold War is that we need some enemy, and the enemy of the time was communism. That's the enemy created at the time, and for that, people need to see that they are really getting ball attacking us, and then the Bogotazo, according to my theory, was not an event against the Colombian people, not even directed against the Latin American people, but was a psychological operation, a psyop against the American people. Immediately, Marshall, who was at the time the Secretary of State, and he was at Bogota at the time, there was a big international conference, and then he blamed the communists for the attack, and that was the Bogotazo marked the onset of the beginning of the Cold War in the Western Hemisphere, and then we need to thank most of that to the efforts of Fidel Castro.
Well, Servando, I think the Bogota riots are not very well known in the Western world today, but they really were kind of like a 9/11 event. They set the Cold War in motion in the Western Hemisphere, and they're quite important. And what Castro was doing there is worth studying. But the bigger point I think people can relate to is that you need an enemy, and these banker types like to create essentially a controlled kind of chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And that controlled chaos can be a fascist military fighting a Marxist guerrilla army. Right?
Or the other way around. Or the other way
around. A communist army fighting fascist guerrillas. What's the difference? As long as you control both of them, essentially. And you don't totally... And here's the point, though, Servando. You don't totally control them. You just control them 50% or 80% or whatever, because you may control their access to the banking system. You may control their access to the oceans. You may control all their oil, right? So it's kind of basically the order out of chaos idea that we read about these days. And I think that's right. And that's what we're actually looking at. And so, Jerry, you were asking, or you're pointing out, like, why would they kill a fascist army guy somewhere? Well, I mean, there could be a lot of reasons. There could be he disobeyed an order. It could be that there's an even more fascist, corrupt dictator waiting in the wings to take over, right? I mean, you just don't know. But certainly one perspective is that all of these things are expendable. Cuba was expendable. Colombia was expendable. Servando, you're saying that Israel and Japan are expendable. I mean, look, even the United States is expendable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
When you come down to it, right? These guys are bankers and they're international in perspective, and they're just trying to control a kind of chaos. And I think that's something we might uh, step back and see. It's
Yeah,
not like they're on one side or another. It's they see themselves as being above all
yeah.
sides.
And even the ones who live in the United States, they don't consider themselves anymore, if they ever were considered as American. They are internationalists. Okay. And now let's go back to my book, The Nuclear Deception, Psychological Warfare and the New World Order. That book was published in 2002. I began writing the book. Well, I spent almost 6 years writing that book. And then initially, the book was going to be a book about the CIA. And even I had a title for the book. The title, let me think, was going, Kiss Your CIA Goodbye, Why the Agency is a getting or disappearing into oblivion, more or less. But then, half through my book, I say, well, no, the CIA is very important, but the CIA is not the whole thing. Right? And then I open my perspective, and then the result of this analysis is the book, The Nuclear Deception, Psychological Warfare and the New World Order. And let me tell you, for many years, I was totally convinced that Americans were the most stupid people on planet Earth. Why? Because, well, it seems that they didn't see what was going on in front of their noses. What say they don't see what's going on? These people are very stupid. Then, after they get really, in my book, I say, well, no, Americans are not stupid. The problem with the American people is that since the days of Nazi Germany, no people have been under such a psychological warfare attack than the American people. And that's why Americans are totally brainwashed. Surprisingly.
One of the things you mentioned, Servando, in your book that I found fascinating was that you kind of broke it down into a CIA version A and a CIA version B, and one of them is essentially designed to fail or to look incompetent.
Let me finish my idea, and then we'll go about that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there is a psychological warfare attack on the American people, mostly the media. Now, surprisingly, and this thanks to the internet, where we are doing this interview thanks to the internet, and it seems that the CFR conspirators totally miscalculated. They underestimated the power of the internet, and this is rapidly growing a new mass of Americans who don't feel themselves as leftists or rightists or Republicans or Democrats, that they are only for the truth. And they have a new idea, and they realize that the government is a hoax, that there is no two parties, and everything is a lie, and they are awakening. And this awakening has surprised not only me, but also the conspirators. 3 years ago, Zbigniew Brzezinski, he was in Canada in an impromptu CFR meeting, and he mentioned that people were, not only that people were awakening, but also that there was some dissension among them. Okay, so I think that now's the time. So
I was just going to say, Servando, to bring it back to Castro, would you be able to elaborate on how Castro became affiliated with the CFR?
Yeah, well, again, they recruited him in early 1948. Later, I discovered that at least there is a witness who was there. There was a Cuban who was one of the Bay of Pigs invaders, and at the time he was working in a low level job for a contractor for the CIA in Cuba, and he and another guy, strong guys, were put in the looking for a meeting that was going to take place. I'm talking early 1948 at the home of lawyer Mario Lasso. Mario Lasso was a Cuban lawyer educated in the United States that he had close links with the American embassy in Havana and with American businesses in Cuba. And there was a secret meeting at his residence in one of the most exclusive part of Havana. And then at the meeting, there were some people of the CIA there, or people who have been linked to the CIA. And then Castro attended the meeting in company of his friend, Rafael del Pino Ciero. Rafael del Pino Ciero was a close friend of Castro at the time. He was a World War II veteran, educated in the United States, spoke English native, and then he was most likely a CIA agent or a CIA asset. And they were there, and then there is where Castro was recruited and given even a pseudonym, Alex, and was sent to Bogota, Colombia, to participate in Bogota's rights. Then later Castro came to Cuba, never joined the Communist Party. The communists keep hating him, and then he attacked this garrison, was sent to jail, and the Americans put the pressure on Batista, and then he was liberated. He went to Mexico, organized an invasion, went to Cuba, and then he took power in Cuba 90.
Servando, thinking about Castro, what can you tell us about some of the rumors about his life? Like maybe he tried to become a baseball pitcher in the U.S. Did that really happen?
Well, it's not a rumor. After he married, he moved to the United States, and he was living in Queens in 1946, was that. And he was an aspiring pitcher in the New York Giants farm system. And the strange thing is that he was very good. He was even offered a contract, but he turned it down, allegedly because of his new political interests. But this is true. This is true. He has been always a baseball fan. When in an interview that he had with Dan Rather during his guerrilla days at the Sierra Maestra, he told Dan Rather that he stopped the war for 3 days in order to listen to the American baseball games on the radio. This revelation was so amazing that Rather asked him in disbelief, listening to the New York Yankees games, to which Fidel answered, brother, yes, the Yankees games. Yes, Yankees game. His anti-Americanism is something new because he was always very pro-American. The only film he seems to enjoy were American movies, the ones about gangsters and cowboys. Okay.
I guess he's the gangster, not the cowboy.
Well, no, about gangster. Well, he's a gangster, but about gangster and cowboys. And I think I mentioned already that in the early 1950s, and this is a very less known fact about him, because I found just by chance in a strange source. Before his Bogotazo adventure, he became so infatuated with American films that he traveled to California, where he managed to get a job as an extra at the Metro-Goldwyn studios at Culver City. And it is known, and this is I found in a DVD database of Hollywood films, that he appeared at least in 2 films. One that is named Bathing Beauty, that was a 1944 film starring Esther Williams and Red Skelton, and Holiday in Mexico, that was in 1946, starring Walter Pigeon, Ilona Massey, and both films were directed by George Sidney and included music by Xavier Cugat and his orchestra. So if he acted as an extra in 1944 and 1946, that shows that he spent some long time in California, and this is mostly ignored. It doesn't appear in any of his biographies, any other author except my book, The Secret Fidel Castro, mentions it.
Servando, so when was he trying to become a baseball pitcher? Do we know what year that was?
Well, again, when he was living in Queens, that was in 1946, according to my information. So Queens is in the East Coast, but in 46 he was also in the West Coast, so he was traveling all around the United States in 46 and from 44 to 46.
Now, did he also write a letter to President Roosevelt saying that he wanted to help the United States find out where good minerals were in Cuba? When was that?
He was a 12-year-old student at the school in Santiago de Cuba, and the Colegio Dolores, also managed by the Jesuits. And then he wrote a letter. The first time I heard about the letter was by this radio guy. The rest of the story, what's his name? He had a radio program, and I heard it mention it. And then I began researching, and then I found the copy, and the director of the National Archives sent me a copy. A facsimile of the copy is in my book as an appendix in my book, The Secret Fidel Castro Deconstructed the Symbol. And he asked a letter in a macaronic English. And then in the letter, he asked President Roosevelt to send him one of the new beautiful $20 bills. And then at the end, there was a note where he said, well, I know where the iron mines are in my province Oriente, and this I would like to be a guide for the Americans to find this mineral for the ships. And
so
that
he wanted to be an American agent even when he was 12 years old.
Eventually, he became one.
Exactly.
Servando,
do you think that he became a communist and joined the Soviet camp out of an ideology, or do you think this was because of U.S. pressure?
None of the above. He never, contrary to his claims and the claims of his enemies, Castro has never been a communist. When he went to the, as I mentioned before, when he went to 1948, he went to Bogota, Colombia, after being recruited by the CIA as an agent provocateur. And of course, the CIA and General Marshall, who was there, accused the communists and everybody, and even there is the chief of police of Bogota at the time, in a report, say that there were 2 communist agents from the KGB in Bogota at the time, 2 Cubans, Fidel Castro and his friend Rafael del Pino Sierra. But he had never been a member of the Communist Party. Then after this extraordinary success in Colombia, when he came back to Cuba, let's suppose that he had been like a secret, a crypto-communist. But no, the communists never accepted him and kept criticizing him. So he has never been a communist. There's no proof about that. But the most the proof that most people bring about that is when in December 2, 1962, to the big surprise of the Soviets and the Cuban communists, in a long speech, more than 4 hours, Castro told the Cuban people and the world that he has been a Marxist all his time and all his life, and that he will be a Marxist.
Okay, Servando, then what do you think his main motivation in life has been? Just power, purely power?
Absolutely. I think his main motivation in life has been only power, his will to power. That is. The rest is just...
Well, then that sounds like a fascist. They write books about will to power.
Well, yes. When there is a Leni Riefenstahl, the
Triumph of the Will.
The Triumph of the Will.
The title in English.
Will is very important in fascist leaders, in fascist...
What about in terms of national and international policy? What do you think his biggest successes or failures have been?
Well, I think that he has had two big successes. One of them, I think his main success has been making the American and international left believe that he is one of them, that he has been a leftist and a socialist. Nothing of this is true. He has always been an agent of the most reactionary right. And I mentioned before his involvement in the assassination of President Allende of Chile, and also in the capture and killing of Che Guevara. I think that both of these events were joint CIA Castro operations.
What about failures? Any failures?
No, let me finish. But the main proof of that is the invasion of Angola in 1975. In the Castro invaded Angola, more than 40,000 troops invade Angola, and then, later it was known that the Gulf oil was paying Castro's soldiers in hard currency, in dollars, to protect the refineries in Cabinda from saboteurs. Now, in 1977, just 2 years after Castro invaded, and just a few months after his troops gained control of Angola, the country became one of the main commercial partners of the United States in Africa. Chase Manhattan Bank, Bankers Trust, Citibank, Morgan Guaranty gave large loans to Angola. General Motors, General Tire, Caterpillar, Boeing, IBM, NCR, Pfizer, Xerox, and other American corporations, all of them corporate members of the Council of Foreign Relations, did good business in Angola. 95% of Angola's oil was exported to the West. Half of the production of Gulf oil in Angola ended up in American refineries, and the consortium, De Beers, still control the diamonds mines. So if this is
that's communism.
What about the claims, Servando, that, Castro, there's been, 638 attempted assassinations of Castro? Do you think that that's just BS, or do you think that?
Yes, I think it's total BS. Yeah,
Of course it's BS, Jerry. They just blow up planes and helicopters. They don't have to give cigars that explode and stuff. That's ridiculous.
They can assassinate an American president. They cannot get rid of this monkey in Cuba. Who's going to believe that? Yeah.
Hey, Servando, a couple of things I think the listeners should know that I got from reading your book. First of all, there's the question of Castro's missing time. Right? It looks like he lived in the U.S. a couple of times, right?
Interesting.
Right. This is important in many ways because it's one thing to go to a party with a rich guy who knows somebody in the CIA or something,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, many of our listeners have had that experience. You've just been to a rich guy's party, right? That's not quite proof. But when you start talking about time that he covers up, right? He was in Hollywood movies.
Oh, yeah. What do you read that in my book?
Yes, in your book. And
I found this is in no book about Castro mentions that. And I found just by chance, because it's not printed, and I found just by chance in a CD that has a database of Hollywood films.
Well, Servando, history will not absolve all the history book writers. Okay, so but this is fascinating. I mean, what's he doing in Hollywood? And then he lived in New York City for a year and a half?
It's interesting because we don't know. This is a mystery. And he acted in this carnival in Mexico, and another one, I'm sorry because I'm thinking about the name. You know that when they show the films in Latin America, they change the titles. And then one with this swimmer, Esther Williams, I don't remember the title in English. And he acted in it. But it seems that the copies in Hollywood have been, his part is not there anymore, have been edited.
Edited out. Well, what a surprise.
What a surprise. Interesting. Now, because Castro, he wanted to be an actor. He wanted to be a picture for the New York Yankees. He wanted to, and then he had been in the United States many times, and sometimes we don't know. This is totally to act into these two films. He had to be in California. Well, there's nothing about that. Nothing about that. Then he married. He went to for his honeymoon in the United States, and then he was in New York, and he disappeared also. He disappeared from view. Now, and this
how long was he in New York?
Hi?
How long do you think he was in New York?
Oh, there is a photograph of him in the Central Park, and he spent several months, but it's a mystery because we don't know much now. And this is just, unfortunately, I couldn't, the guy who told me this, I moved a few years ago. I was in Mobile, Alabama, and one day was I've been all around the United States, and then one day in a post office, I began talking to a guy, and the guy, he was fluent, he's an American, fluent in Spanish, and he told me that he was a documentary, he made documentary, and then he told me that he was a Marine, and then that he took some training at Quantico. No, he was a Marine or he was working for the CIA. Well, but he took some training at Quantico. Keep in mind that before they had what is called the farm, where they trained the CIA agents, at the very beginning, the CIA trained in Quantico. That was the FBI training place. And then when he trained in Quantico, he heard some people mention that Castro had been trained there. Unfortunately, the guy moved to, he went to Brazil for his documentary. I moved out of Mobile and I don't remember his name, but it's just a bit of information. Now, under that light, if you see most of the way the behavior of Castro, it seems that he had got some intelligence training. It's obvious. It's obvious.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, there are many things in the and CIA help in his book about Castro. What's his name? There's an automated book about Castro, biography. Now escaped my mind. And he mentioned that the CIA was giving him help, money, and weapons through the Guantanamo Bay. In Tatsulk's book about Castro. But now, there is a point where he began a terrorist campaign against Batista. But suddenly, and this is mentioned by Tatsulk, suddenly this terrorism campaign seemed to be more efficient and more organized. Well, it's obvious that he has some CIA protection because do you know that some people tried to give a coup d'etat to Hugo Chavez?
Yes.
Okay, and then Castro later told that he had alerted Hugo Chavez about the coup. Okay, but now we know that actually the CIA was trying to give the coup. The one who alerted Hugo Chavez was the CIA. Okay, there are so many connections that are not clear.
You realize that that's going to be a pretty controversial statement, because a lot of people would argue that, again, that the United States and the CIA have a hate-on for Chavez, and, the last thing they would want to do is alert Chavez that there's a coup going on.
Yeah. They alerted Chavez about the coup. They protected him.
When you say they, are you saying the CIA, or are you saying that Castro alerted Chavez?
Well, but how he got the information? No, there are both that Castro alerted and that the CIA alerted Castro. I have read in different books, both sources.
Well, okay, but Servando, I think we have to also get into factions. I mean, most listeners are not going to think that there's one, banker dictator in the sky who controls everything. They're going to be like the CIA might care about drug smuggling, and maybe Venezuela's a good place, and they liked Chavez for that, for example. And maybe Castro liked him because he had the same, fiery rhetoric and so on and so forth. I mean, there could be different motivations that we're not totally sure of.
Well, I think that of course, the CIA have been linked to drug smuggling and producing, but I think this is like a second job. That's not the main job. That's the way that CIA operatives get rich. I don't think that is the true.
Yeah, but Servando, that drug money is what keeps Wall Street on top. I mean, without the drug money, the United States banking system would not be remotely what it is today. I mean, it's it's a little bit more than just that. I mean, that drug money goes to New York. And I mean, you even have like the head of the New York Stock Exchange going down and talking to the head of one of the Colombian cocaine cartels, right? We have that famous picture. So I'm trying to say that
and explains.
I'm supporting your argument. I'm just saying that I think we can't downplay drugs. I mean, that money.
No. I agree, and that explains the United States intervention in Vietnam, and now the things in Afghanistan, and it's drugs. Okay.
But I tell you what, since we've gotten into Chavez, I think we should say a little bit here. And your thesis in the book that I read is along the lines that, from the big picture point of view, Castro created a lot of trouble and led to the Cold War, led to military spending, led to all kinds of tension, an enemy off the coast. Now, with Chavez, we have a guy who scares the middle and upper classes in Latin America, right? And that drives them towards the U.S. They will support things they otherwise wouldn't have.
Not
right?
only that, Castro provoked the flight of capital from Central and South America to the United States because the rich people became very scared about first Castro and then the Sandinistas in Nicaragua and Chavez. By the way, I don't think, I think that Chavez was just a tool. I think he was a true believer.
In what? In leftist?
No. That he didn't know that Castro was using him.
Okay, well, in other words, you think he just didn't know?
No. I think he was, he believed that he was doing this anti-American revolution in Nicaragua, in Venezuela, and no, I don't think that he ever knew. By the way, I wrote an article about that. There are strong suspicions that Castro killed Chavez, inoculating him with cancer cells. Okay? And I don't discard the possibility. Castro has actually Castro has killed more friends than enemies. He participated of he was the one who ordered the assassination of President Salvador Allende in Chile, and he was a part of the capture and killing of Che Guevara in Bolivia.
Didn't Chavez actually get cancer treatment in Cuba?
Yes.
So you think possibly when he went there they could have made it worse or something?
Yeah, and was not the first. There are many cases of these people suspected. The Cubans in Florida, the one who was, what's his name, who was the ones who created the Cuban, Mascanosa, the one who created the Cuban American National Foundation. Most people believe that he was inoculated a cancer cell produced cancer. There is a way to do that. They put in the seat of your car a minute small particle of radioactive material and leave there for a few weeks, and then they take out, and then you get cancer, prostate cancer, or something like that. So it's a very way to do that. The Russians were experts in doing that kind of thing also. So, and the thing with Che Guevara is that Che Guevara was a true believer, and Castro don't like true believers. At some time, Che Guevara tried to create his own guerrilla movement in Latin America, non-control. Che Guevara became very critical of the Soviet Union, and he became most of a Trotskyist than a communist, and then he had to be eliminated.
So do you think Che Guevara suspected Castro in any way?
Well, if you read his diary, most likely at the very end of his life, when he was in the guerrilla, when he was captured, he realized that Castro has abandoned him, and more than that, that Castro has betrayed him. It's not said. It's just, if you read between the lines, you see that he felt that something was wrong. And they got rid of him. Now, as I told you, Castro was recruited by the CIA in early 1948. But then after he took power in 1959, he came to the United States. And then he visited the Council on Foreign Relations, where he had a long secret meeting with the Rockefellers and a few of the high senior people there, that was not reported in the press, not at all. And knowing Castro's personality, it seems that he realized that he didn't need the CIA as an intermediary, and that he began dealing directly with the Rockefellers.
Servando, I've read and heard at different times that Castro and his his daughter have been, regular visitors with the Rockefellers. Do we have evidence of that?
The Rockefeller's daughter said a visit to Cuba. One of the Rockefeller's daughters. But what daughter, Castro? What?
Well, I don't know. Does he have, or then I'm getting it wrong, and it's Rockefeller's daughter. But there's this strong connection between the Rockefeller family and the Castros. Am I?
Well, in his memoir, David Rockefeller, he admits that of his relations with Castro, his close relation with Castro. It's not a rumor. It's told by David Rockefeller himself. Okay, and say, well, some people have theories that we, the Rockefeller, we have an inordinate a power of the world, our money, and then we are trying to change the world into a new world order. And also about my friendship and my meetings with Castro. Well, it is true, and I'm proud of it. That is, and I quote exactly that in my book, Psychological Warfare and the New World Order. So that was admitted by the Rockefellers. And I knew that some high-level Cubans, when came to the United States, in New York, they stood at and some of the Rockefellers had mansions in Manhattan. So it's a close relationship. David Rockefeller have visited Cuba at least in 2 occasions, and then he was, this is a marvelous place, the better education, the better society in the world, because, and this is something that is in my book, Psychological Warfare, I have the theory that contrary to what Cubans in Miami believe and people not believe, the Castro's Cuba has been is a total success.
Yes, for the New World Order.
Absolutely, because the Rockefellers used Castro to implement Cuba and use Cuba as a testing ground to implement a new order. Now, why Cuba? Why not Venezuela, Mexico, Argentina? Because, believe it or not, what the leftists said about Cuba, that Cuba was a colony of the United States, right, to some extent, but Cuba was the most developed country in America, apart from the United, just second to the United States. Just second to the United States. In most indexes, economic indexes, Cuba was second to none in Latin America. I'm talking in 1959 when Castro took power. And Cuba was above Japan, Italy, okay, in income per capita, TV sets, radio sets, automobiles, radio station, TV station. In 1959, when Castro took power in Cuba, there were in Havana alone more than 20 radio stations. Huh?
Well, that probably sounds bad because there should only be 3.
Yeah, probably today Paris doesn't have 20 radio stations. Cuba has 4 TV channels. 1959, the first color TV channel in the world outside the United States was in Havana. When Castro took power in Havana, Cuba
well, Servando, I think Cuba was used as a marketing test ground for the United States.
Let me go to this. When Castro took power, Cuba had a system of communications. Cuba, you see, is a long island, not too wide except in the eastern part, but it's a long island. And then Cuba was a system of telecommunication by microwave that was unique in the world. An American company was testing it in Cuba. Probably at home you still use this cleaner called Ajax. You remember Ajax? That's a cleaner in the kitchen. Well, in Cuba we used Ajax for about 6 months before the United States because they were testing it in the American market. Why? Because the American consumer was the closest in the world to the American consumers. Close something that the marketing and advertising companies in Lexington Avenue discovered, and they use Cuba as a testing ground for pre-launching their products.
So, Servando, where is Cuba now?
Well, Cuba now, at the bottom of the pit, Cuba now in most indexes is below Haiti. This is incredible. And so that's I say that has been a total success, because what is the hidden goals of the New World Order? You remember George Herbert Walker Bush in every speech, like a circus parrot. He said, "Oh, the New World Order, the New World Order. We need to create the New World Order. The New World Order is coming." Well, the New World Order, the two goals of the conspirators who want to implement the New World Order are depopulation and deindustrialization. These people, it seems that having too much money makes you a little crazy. These people believe that planet Earth is overpopulated and that we, useless eaters, are using the resources that, of course, by law, belong to them. And then they decide that they need to kill at least 85% of us. I'm not joking.
No, I understand that, but that hasn't happened in Cuba.
Huh?
But that hasn't happened in Cuba. They haven't killed 85%.
Well, but the Cuba has one of the highest numbers of abortions in Latin America, and Cuba has participated in wars around the world. So Cuba has been used to kill people.
One of the things. I was just going to say, one of the other things that you mentioned in the book that supports that point is that the most obvious thing Cuba should have done was used sugarcane as fuel, and they never ever did for whatever reason, right?
You are absolutely right. I remember I'm an old man. I was a kid, that during the Second World War, I was a boy, and I remember that Cubans were using something they call carburante nacional. And carburante nacional was a mixture of just probably 20% of gasoline and 80% of alcohol, and probably some additives. And the cars work fine. So you can make fuel from sugar cane. You have never tried. Also, the second goal of the New World Order conspirators is deindustrialization. Well, the Berkeley progressive got to Cuba, and they are, amazing. This is the society of the future, because Cubans have no cars. They consume less oil than ever before, and they are dirty poor. Say they don't destroy the resources of the earth that belong to the Rockefellers and the bankers. So Cuba is a total success, and that's one of the things that I am very scared, because what I see here in the United States is a reenactment, of the things that I saw in Cuba, and I escaped from there, and it's here. Not the methodology of implementation is not the same, because in Cuba, Castro first took power and he forced the measures, And here they don't have total power, and they try to convince us to that. So it's good to be dirty poor because we are saving Gaia.
Maybe you could also touch upon gun control in Cuba, because that's sort of a hot topic right now, Servando.
Yeah, I wrote an article. Many years ago. That what's the title of the article? The real makers of lethal weapons are in our schools. The real makers of, more or less, this is the true makers of the real makers of lethal weapons are in our schools. And that's motivated by one of the early shootings in a school. About 6 or 7 years later, there was another shooting, and a very important site, Warner Daily, they contacted me asking me authorization to reproduce the site, and they published and said, well, this prophetic article was written 6 years ago or 7 years ago, I don't remember. And then I mentioned the problem of guns. When I told you that what really happened in Cuba was not a revolution, was a rebellion, a popular rebellion to overthrow an unpopular tyrant, dictator with some trying to become a tyrant. But he was not that bad in comparison. Anyway, was a popular rebellion. And then in that rebellion participate a majority of young people. And I remember after 1959, when Batista was overthrown, almost everybody in Cuba was carrying guns, openly and concealed. No difference. I remember going to classes at the University of Havana, carrying I was in the army, my Czech submachine gun, okay, and also an automatic pistol. And most of the people there, they were carrying guns, including the professors. Everybody was armed in the streets, most people. And was the quietest times in Cuba, criminality just went to zero. No criminality. Everybody was carrying guns. Everybody was armed. Then, when 2 or 3 years later, Castro called, said, well, we don't need guns. We are protected. Nothing going to happen here. And then came gun registration. And of course, I trusted the government, and I registered I had some personal guns, and then I registered the guns, and then a few months later came gun confiscation. And then criminality rise, but not by criminals and the thugs in Castro's police and repressive organizations. So I have lived, because people say, well, if everybody's carrying a gun, what's going to happen? Well, nothing will happen. It will be very quiet this time. And I saw this, and it has happened here in the United States, when in Dade County, 8-9 years ago, they decided to make a very liberal, giving permission people to carry concealed guns, and then criminality lower, and see that most of the cities with highest criminality in the United States, including Washington, D.C., are cities where there is a strict gun control. And I mentioned in my book, I mentioned another book that I don't remember the author, but the author was an ex-military who became a psychologist. And the name of the book is On Killing. And this psychologist analyzes and see that killing is a very serious thing, and you need to be mentally conditioned to kill. It's not that you have a gun; it's that you are decide to use it. And this was what is his name? This famous philosopher of guns, that he created the basic rules of gun security. That he said, men fight with their minds. The tools they use are irrelevant. Oh, his name is Jeff Cooper. Have you heard about Jeff Cooper?
Not
Yes,
off the back
he's
of my head.
Jeff Cooper.
quite well known as a theoretician, practical, a very important figure.
And he say men, and this is true, men fight with their minds. You use a baseball bat, a brick, stone, a knife, not necessarily a firearm. And this book on killing this psychology, he analyzed that during the Revolutionary War and during even during the Civil War, they found that some of the rifles, they have 3, 4, or 5 bullets in the barrel.
Hey, Servando.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to move on to your thoughts on where you think Cuba may go in the future, because if you are correct that it's a Castro family, their CFR, and it's been a New World Order testing ground. The Castros are now old, the world has changed, the Soviet Union's gone, that kind of thing. Where do you think these forces want to take Cuba in the future? Will it open up to the West? Will it become a gambling tourist site for Florida people?
I think that deeper in the hole, probably that will do, but it will not benefit the Cuban people. Actually, the maquiladoras, these factories in Mexico where workers are paid very low salaries, and then that is Cuba. Cuba will be part of the periphery of the New World Order, like a playing ground of people, and the Cuban people will be kept. Have you seen this film by any chance called The Hunger Games?
Yes.
Well, Cuba is a sort of a real-life Hunger Games.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Is it that bad?
Yeah, it's a real-life Hunger Games, and the United States is going the same way. Unfortunately, it's going the same way. It's very disturbing. There is I'm very pessimistic. I saw this happening in Cuba, and probably we have waited too long in the United States to put an end to this. But that's how things go. Let's say, unfortunately, when I was in Cuba, there was a place to escape to. Now there isn't, as Ronald Reagan said, and he was true. This is the last line of defense. This is the last line of defense.
Well, Servando, cheer up. I'm not sure I totally will agree with that. Having spent a lot of time around the world and living in Asia, I think in many ways the future looks pretty bright for Asia. And I just see the West in serious decline, and the CFR and the New World Order lunatics are a sign of that decline. They're poisoning themselves when they're poisoning the public, And I don't think they have that total control in, let's say, Asia, for example. And so, anyway, we'll see. There are historical forces above these guys. It's not like Castro or David Rockefeller are the only thing that matter. So
yeah,
we'll
and
see.
As I read some time ago, somebody said that all historical predictions are going to fail. We don't know what's going to happen. Russia now has become an obstacle to these people, and then they don't know what to do. But then my real concern is that these people, again, as I told you, they have told that they want to kill at least 85% of the population in this planet. Now, what if you had to do that? What fast tool would you use? Nuclear war. Are they plan something like that? I don't know.
Well, that raises a lot of questions, but we can't answer. What are the technologies? What are the, I mean, they've got a fleet in space, I mean, what do they control and what are their factional fights and whatever? We don't totally know because, I mean, even with something like China, I don't think we can be sure what China is actually trying to do. I mean, you mentioned that countries are expendable, right? And that Israel could be thrown away or Japan could be thrown away. But you see, I'm in Japan, and I would argue that the U.S. has been sabotaging and attacking Japan for 25 years,
Really?
easily. Yes, because you see, Japan has great economic and technological power. And if Japan became a friend with Russia or China, I think that would be the end of the American empire right there. It's that simple. It would only take one switch and it's all over. And they know that. And so the American presence in Japan is to prevent that. I mean, if that were to happen, I think they would do something dramatic. I mean, they'd let off a nuke in Tokyo or something. They're not going to allow that. And so it's not that simple. What you're saying about Castro is that the media have totally presented a lie, right? Okay, but if it's true about Castro, it may well be true about other things too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you can't assume that anything you're reading is really true. I mean, the Western press give an incredibly negative view of things in Russia or with Putin. And I think that's grossly exaggerated and full of lies, to be honest, because he's an enemy, more or less.
Yeah. And the thing is that I don't think that Russia is a paradise. For Russians, they love snow and cold, but and Putin. Let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that Putin is just another corrupt politician. Well, but there is a difference. Putin is a Russian who loves his country. Putin doesn't want to destroy Russia, contrary to these people, the New World Orders, that they live in the United States and they want to destroy the United States. Okay?
Yes, exactly.
It's a big difference. Now, about Japan, as I told you in previous conversation, I've been in Japan a couple of times. I began learning Japanese myself. I'm familiar with the culture. I have several friends there. And I just a few weeks about the Fukushima, I think I wrote an article where I questioned or I mentioned the possibility that Fukushima was not a natural disaster. It's in the internet. I don't remember the title of the article. And you, of course, you are familiar with this, the HAARP in Alaska that can create earthquakes. And there are several ways that could have been provoked. And these people
and we don't know.
Are capable. By the way, we have not mentioned in our conversation some very important, because if you listen to Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and the other guys, and as well as public radio and these people, the main thing that divides Americans are conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats. I don't think so. I think that the true thing that divides Americans is their vision, their idea of what happened on 9/11/2001. Can you tell me what happened that day?
Oh, that's a long story because I don't think what we saw on TV was remotely true. I think that was the Hollywood production, and now the actual details. It was a long planned thing by the CFR types, especially, but others, to like the Bogotazo. This was a high level. And it was also a ritual. It was like a satanic ritual. There are a lot of elements to this.
Well,
and It was a magic
Yeah,
ritual. It was a, like a,
yeah, yeah.
the black side of magic. It
Spielberg,
was that too.
Spielberg, Spielberg.
And
Well,
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the director was, from Spielberg's crew or whatever. But so it
yeah,
was a lot of things, but it was also the excuse for an endless war system, just like with
yeah, yeah.
Bogota.
Well,
It
you belong. In this case, you belong to this growing majority that is totally ignored by the disinformers of both the right and the left. People who think that what I call it the Hippocratic Party, think that the two parties are the same, that the government is controlled by the bankers, and that none that they say, nothing they say us is true. Let me tell you my 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 vision of what happened 9/11. In the first place, I stopped reading the mainstream press probably 15 years ago, and I stopped watching TV more than 20 years ago. In the last 20 years, I don't even own a TV set. I have a Sony, big Sony TV monitor just to watch VHS films, but I don't watch TV. Period. Then that day, I was at home, and then my son called me, and because we used to live in New York, say, Dad, watch it, so something is happening in Manhattan, take it, and then watch it, see what is going, it's on TV, and then I remember that I had a small TV, those the one that they have at the bottom, the VHS, to watch VHS films, small, and then I got in the closet, I have an antenna, I have to put a clothes hanger, and then I began watching. One of the towers, and then the plane, and then the tower collapsed. And then when the tower collapsed, and then I turned the TV off. My son called me. What do you think? I said, well, this is the government. What do you say that? Yeah, this is the government. Oh, no, you're crazy. How the government? Yeah, because the government is the only one that can do that. Well, let me tell you, I was in the army, but I'm not a demolition expert. I'm not, okay? But I know that skyscrapers do not collapse on their own base by magic. That's why there are companies that they charge millions and millions of dollars what is called a controlled demolition. That avoids that when the skyscraper is destroyed, it doesn't go and destroy the other buildings on the side. And never before 9/11, 2001, a skyscraper has collapsed as a result of fire. But
Not
never.
only that, Building 7 never got hit at all. It just collapsed.
Wait. No. Not even mentioning Building 7 that was magic. It's not even mentioned in the report of the 9/11 Commission. Of course, what they were going to say. Okay. Now, why people? Do you remember? Do you watch on TV what happened? That there was a loop. There was a loop, and there was a loop, and the tower collapsed, and the tower collapsed. Well, that is subliminal brainwashing. By the way, there is a TV announcer that she's telling the news that Building 7 had collapsed, and still you see the Building 7 in the background.
Well, Servando, I think at this point a lot of people have come out of the trance because, like you're saying, there was kind of a trance, a mystical experience there put over the public, and a lot of people are waking up from that trance. And now the question is, what do you do about it? I do have one comment. A lot of people from other countries, when they visit the U.S. or spend some time there, are kind of amazed at how the whole country seems to be brainwashed and programmed. And by that I mean it's kind of like, there are paths set for you to fall into, like I'm a conservative and I'm against gun control and I vote Republican and this kind of thing or whatever. And then, I'm a progressive, I'm this, I'm that, and all that other kind of thing. And it's like the actual variety is really quite narrow. I mean, you can go to a place that says that we're diverse, right? We love diversity, and you find no diversity.
No, not at all.
You know what I mean? In other words, what do you mean? The diversity is whether you get a tattoo on the left hand or the right hand. I mean, that's not diversity. Diversity is totally different ways of surviving, ways of thinking. You know what I mean? Do you read Dostoevsky or do you read Maya Angelou? I don't know, but diversity is not that we all get the same kind of pierces, right? That's not diversity, and it's not. And I don't mean to pick on the people who are liberal necessarily in this sense, because I think it's the same story with people who are on the right. It's been very programmed for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think if you come from some other countries, you'll see it. It's like, well, where are the people who think this, or where are the people who think the other? And even with take, for example, stuff that used to be very diverse, like let's say all the churches in America. That's become very corporate, very, the whole 501c3 movement to make it government tax controlled. And so, I don't know, but to me as a kid,
they have been co-opted.
Right, there are all kinds of different churches, and they're all the same now. They're all very, very bland.
It's all homogenous.
Yes, exactly. And this was part of the takeover. And so you could practically go, I mean, if you went to the biggest church in a Denver suburb, and then you went to the biggest church in a Tampa suburb, and then you went to the biggest church in wherever, New England somewhere, they're all going to be the same. It's like the takeover of chain stores and everything else.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Well, but this is the way we do. That doesn't mean that I or you or people who have a different idea, we have the whole truth, the only truth, and all the truth. But at least we are awake. We are awake, and we are skeptic about the information that we get from the government and from the media. And then that's the way we need to be not passive consumers of information. We need to react and analyze the information and see what is real and what is not real.
Well, you remember that quote from a head of the CIA that we will know our disinformation campaign is successful when everything the American people knows is false.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, that's their goal, and so that's just the way it is, and we have to fight this. But by the way, I mentioned I'm from D.C. There's another thing. You talk about the CIA's A and B. I actually think there are a lot of people talk about the CIA as the broken kingdom or the fractured kingdom. I think it's more like A, B, C, D, E, and F, G. I think they're much more dysfunctional than that, and that's actually some of it by design, like you're saying. But then I do think these criminals fight amongst themselves, and there's more like a Brzezinski left-wing CIA and an Iran-Contra right-wing, and you know what I mean. They're all criminals, but I do think there are these factional fights that sometimes you see, like what do you do in the Middle East, or what do you do with China, or whatever. So I think there are some opportunities for the truth to come out and for us to actually win a few victories here and there. But one other thing, we talked about Cuba going forward. What do you see happening in Latin America? Some people talk about a Latin American spring, like an Arab Spring, a CIA, British intelligence kind of revolutionary spirit being possible in Latin America. What do you think?
Being possible?
Well, not just possible. Do you think that that's in the cards? I mean, some people, I think Adrian Salbucci of Argentina has talked about this a fair bit, but in Latin America, you don't have like a religious thing to exploit, like Sunni versus Shia very much. You don't have anything like that. But you have the class problem, which, like it with the example of Castro and Chavez, the people who have a certain amount of money are frightened to death of a populist left-wing or a communist-leaning kind of government.
Yeah.
And you could exploit that if you needed to.
Well, I really, that's something that is totally speculation. But there is something that we in Latin America. I experienced in Cuba, and we are a lot more skeptic. We in Latin America, people don't believe the government. Okay, most people don't believe any type of government. They are more skeptic. They are more difficult to control. But you see what happened. You see what happened in Venezuela. The problem with Cuba is that we were taken by surprise. Nobody expected what was going to happen in Cuba. If in January 1959, when Castro took power, you tell the Cuban this is going to happen, people will say, this guy is crazy. This will never happen here in Cuba. Okay, but now we have the example of Cuba. And then in Venezuela has not been so easy because Venezuelans, the Venezuelan people, see what happened in Cuba. So I don't think that will be so easy. Also, in Latin America, we don't have that kind of religious fanaticism that you can find in the Middle East. Okay? They are religious to some point. I don't think that type of thing may happen in Latin America. But again, I tell you, nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Sure, but again, it would be the class difference that's so extreme in Latin America.
The media, the power of the media the media is very powerful, and people they control the media now. Oh, by the way, are you aware that finally they are trying to eliminate what is called internet neutrality? Is the name? Are you aware
well, they're
of that?
trying to. Yes, of course. They're trying to take away the victories we had in the 1990s regarding the internet, basically. They're trying to control it.
Neutrality, I believe what it is, that everybody has the same power. Okay, my site that 20 people a day go to it has the same power that a site that has 20 million daily. I have the same power, but they want to eliminate that and guide the internet travelers to some sites and deviate them from other sites. If that happens, that would be a big step in their total control. By the way, I think that the conspirators totally miscalculated about the power of the internet, and now they are scared. People are awakening. But if you, but there is a point. Why in totalitarian countries they have censorship? Well, they have censorship because first people began reading. They began talking to each other. Then they discovered that they have been fooled. They discovered the truth. And then finally they rebel against the oppressor. But if that last step is absent, you don't need censorship. Why? People are never going to rebel. So why censorship? They can talk, they can write, they can yell, but nothing will change. That's my
just before we wrap up, I was just going to say, I wanted to give an endorsement for Servando's book, Psychological Warfare in the New World Order. I want to say thank you for sending me a copy. And it's a great book. It's really 3 or 4 books in one. It's got a lot of info, so I think anybody listening to the interview might want to pick that book up.
Yeah, I found it quite helpful, Servando. I think you've done a good job in getting a topic that is almost not talked about, even though I'd heard about this from a number of people for decades, that it was overwhelmingly obvious that Castro and Cuba were American projects and so on. There really wasn't any information or, no book that you could refer somebody to. So this is a very good thing. And so we do appreciate that.
The book is selling, to my surprise. The book is selling well, yeah.
Good. Servando, but before we wrap it up, is there any kind of last points you might want to bring out, things going forward, stuff you're working on, anything like that?
Well, after the psychological warfare, my most recent book is a smaller book that is like a companion, because in psychological warfare, then I have what is called a chronology of treason. And then I have a new book that was published last year that I titled I Dare Call It Treason. And then it's basically a very long chronology of people, non-CFR members who support and criticize the CFR, and then another very long chronology on CFR members that you see they're in their own words, their goal is to end freedom in the United States, in the world, to destroy eliminate the U.S. Constitution, destroy the U.S. sovereignty, and implement a global government, what they call the New World Order. And this is my most recent book. And now I'm you see in my site that I am also not only a historian and intelligence analyst, but also a semiotician. I was a professor of art history and semiotics in Cuba, and then semiotics is the science that has to do with symbols. And just a few weeks ago appeared, but this is just an electronic version for the Apple iPad, and also you can buy it as a PDF. In my site, a new book, fully illustrated, that I titled The Swastika and the Nazis, the misuse of the swastika by the Nazi movement. And it's a book. So I'm working in several things, and then I'm having some ideas what I'm going to write in my next book. Let's see.
Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate that. And your website is what?
My
website,
is at Servando Gonzales, Servando S-E-R-V like in victory, A-N-D-O, Gonzales, G-O-N-Z like in zebra, C-L-E-Z, Gonzales, and the seats, servandogonzales.org. That is my site. And you can find lots of articles in Spanish and English, my books, my videos, documentaries, and all the information about that.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. We'll call it a wrap.
No, thank you,
Jerry.
Thank you for having me in.
Well, we appreciate it. So that's it, listeners. Thanks much. Take care till next time.